Welcome to the Somatic Coaching Academy podcast with Ani and Brian. Join us as we explore the art and science of trauma-sensitive somatic practices and tools to strengthen your practice as a coach, therapist, or holistic professional. Master the art of motivating even the most challenging clients when you'll understand how to tap into and unlock your client's complete holistic intelligence. If you want to learn the most cutting-edge, research-supported skills for personal and professional mastery, you've come to the right place. Let's get this conversation started.
Hi, and welcome to the Somatic Coaching Academy podcast. We're on episode 48, Brian.
48.
Hey there, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm very good. And I wanted to we got some really great community feedback about the new website. So thank you so much for those of you who have reached out and told us how much you like the new website. We really appreciate it. Thank you so much. Before we get started here, I want to let people know that enrollment is open and closing very soon for the Somatic Transformation Fundamentals program. If you've been wanting to become a certified cross-mapping practitioner, that is the program that you want to take. And it's only run twice a year, and you really want to hop in now so that you get started in that journey before 2025. Yeah, so enrollment's going to close soon. If you haven't checked it out, go to our website, our new and improved website, somaticcoachingacademy.com. You can click over there on the programs and see some more information about that. And our team is always really excited to welcome conversations with you about whether or not the program's right for you.
Yep, I'm excited. Oh, so excited to be co-leading that program again. It's just, can't wait to get in there with the students and help them make their changes. And it's super exciting.
It's such a fun time. Oftentimes, this is the first time that students are really doing somatic transformations with us. And gosh, it's so exciting to have them have their big epiphanies and breakthroughs. There are so many big epiphanies and breakthroughs in that program in particular. And it's just it's so fresh and new, and people are so oftentimes really hoping for some kind of change in their lives, or they don't even recognize how much change they really want, how much transformation they really want for themselves. They get in that program and the light bulbs, and the bright
moments.
eyes,
light bulb moments.
The excitement and the joy is so palpable and fun. It's such a wonderful program to be a part of.
Love it.
So today we are talking about
how can coaches distinguish the difference between the 4 levels of trauma training?
I'm really glad we're talking about this, Brian, because there is so much information now, which is amazing, about trauma training. And I've seen the words that we're going to be talking about all mixed up. And I think it's really tough to be a consumer right now, to be a person who's trying to make decisions about what's right for them. Also, as a practitioner, what kind of training do I have, and where do I fit in? And I think it's really challenging right now because people aren't necessarily using the same words. There's not agreed upon language. So I'm glad we're talking about this today.
Yeah. And so we're going to share kind of the language and the terminology that we use to talk about these 4 levels. Now, these are the 4 kind of basic levels, no matter who's talking about them. So as we go through these levels, pay attention to the characteristics of each level so that you know what the characteristics of each level are. And then you can take those characteristics, and then when you're out looking for getting trauma training, if that's what you want to get, you understand what level you're actually working at, regardless of the words that the organization that's doing the training is using.
Yeah.
Right. Sort of thing.
Yeah. Fantastic. Yeah. Some people think they have to be a trauma coach. We have people who will contact us and say, I think I need to be a trauma coach. And then we have other people say, I don't want to be a trauma coach, but I want to have some idea around it. We have a lot of people say, I want to become trauma informed, but that's not what they mean.
That's not actually what they mean. Right.
But that's the most common, I think, terminology that's used out there to mean a whole number of different things as trauma informed, but it's actually in the middle.
Well, partly that's because trauma informed is the phrase that's used in research a lot around trauma informed care. So there's a whole movement around trauma-informed care. So a lot of the research that's been done in the world has been that's the word that's been associated with the research. So it's the one that gets most of the press.
That's happening in education now too. There's more and more education in trauma-informed education, and which is so awesome. I mean, both at trauma-informed care and trauma-informed education. It's so great, but you're right. It's a research term, and we're really helping to take that into the practicality of working with people.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so let's dive in. We're going to talk about these levels from most superficial towards the deepest. And I like to think about these levels as like those Russian nesting dolls. Like you have the outside and then one deeper and one deeper and one deeper. So that by the time you get to the deepest one, you actually have all the other levels also. But when you're only on the superficial one, like that's the level that you're aware of until you go one level deeper. So the very first level of trauma training, we talk about it as being what we call trauma aware. Now, someone else might call it something different, but trauma aware training, the first level, no matter what you call it, is when you've been trained to recognize the widespread prevalence of trauma and its impact on human behavior. So in other words, you understand, okay, so what are the statistics around people and trauma? What actually does it look like? How does it show up? How does it impact a human's health and well-being and those sorts of things? Now, we're not digging down into how that happens or why it happens on a physiological basis. It's a very high look at, oh my God, I never realized those are the statistics around trauma. And I didn't realize that that's how trauma shows up in people's behavior.
When I hear you talk about that, what I'm hearing is an understanding, like not I'm getting in there and doing something.
Correct. Just an awareness.
Understand, right. Like I'm watching that, like that kind of thing. Like I feel like a student who kind of takes notes, like, oh, I didn't know that before. That's the kind of feeling I get when I hear you describe trauma aware.
Yep. Yeah. So it's just trauma aware. And so a lot of people, for instance, aren't aware that, people who've experienced trauma, especially adverse childhood experiences, trauma, early life trauma, are 300% more likely to have chronic pain.
300%. Wow.
So most people don't realize that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Right. And 220% more likely to have cardiovascular disease. So like there's all these links to physiological, physiological health issues that are directly associated to trauma. Now, if you knew those things, you'd be aware of that. Then you'd be trauma aware.
Right. I was just thinking when I was listening to you talk about those statistics that, I've seen time and time again. I'll bet in a number of years, we'll have even more statistics linked to other stuff. But right now, most of the statistics are linked to health concerns.
Yes. Yeah.
But in the future, we'll have statistics linked to things like productivity or, other behavioral kinds of things too. It's kind of new that we're really looking at these links.
Yeah. Yeah. True.
Okay. So that's trauma aware.
That's trauma aware. That's that first level.
Yeah.
And so like really important to understand and get trained on that level. Absolutely. Like
for anybody and
get
everybody.
trained on that for everybody. And by the way, anybody can be trauma aware. You don't have to be a physician or a healthcare practitioner or anybody in particular to be trauma aware. Anybody can be trauma aware.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a great idea for everybody to be trauma aware.
Totally. Okay. Now the next level is what we talk about as being trauma informed. So trauma informed, again, anyone can be trauma informed. A bus driver can be trauma informed. A teacher can, and I think should be trauma informed. Meditation instructors can and should be trauma informed. Everybody, could be trauma informed. So what does that mean? What trauma informed really is when you're trauma informed, you understand the basic 5 components of the trauma informed framework that you use with everyone, all humans. Whether the humans have experienced trauma or not doesn't matter. It's a framework for living. It's a framework for being in the world and applying that 5-step framework to everyone. So again, a bus driver could apply this 5-step framework. A massage therapist can apply this 5-step framework. A teacher can apply this 5-step framework. The cool thing about the trauma-informed part 2 is we love going into organizations and helping organizations set up trauma-informed policies and guidelines so that all of the employees within the organization are now trauma-informed, which includes being trauma-aware. So like, let's say we go into a school and help a school become a trauma-informed education center or trauma-informed school. That means that everyone in the school, from the administrators all the way down to the teachers and all the way down to the support staff, they're all understand the 5-step trauma-informed framework, and they apply that framework on a daily basis with all of the students in order to create a trauma-informed environment. So trauma-informed training is really around these 5 primary steps. And some people stretch it out to 6 or to 7. It kind of has fluxed a little bit over time. Originally, it was these 5 basic steps of safety, trustworthiness, choice, collaboration, and empowerment, and how you actually go and create systems built around those 5 steps in order to have a trauma-informed organization.
The thing I love the most about this is it's just a really fantastic, compassionate, being an awesome human way to treat other humans. It really is. It's a great way it feels great to be in places where there's trauma-informed policies and trauma-informed people. It's such a wonderful way to be a great human being. Mm-hmm. And again, we're not getting involved. We're not getting our hands in and doing something different with certain people. It's just, this is the way we do it for everybody.
Yeah.
It feels really wonderful.
Yeah. And I love that we are a trauma-informed organization. So we do training with our faculty and with our support staff here at the Somatic Coaching Academy to follow these 5 principles. So we meet all of the people that come into our universe, whether they are prospective students getting on the phone with a program manager and program advisor, administrator, or whether they're talking to a faculty member. We're all coming at it from these 5 steps. That's a part of how when we ask ourselves, what policies do we want to create within our organization to meet the community and the environments? We always run it through that filter. We say, are these filters, we tick in those 5 boxes?
Yeah, so this is really a culture thing. So a lot of organizations specifically talk about culture, and I think every single organization out there should have this as a part of their culture.
100%, because it feels good and it feels productive for not just people who've experienced trauma. Any human nervous system appreciates these 5 components.
Every human nervous system. And here's a fun fact that you might not believe. Every human has a nervous system. Yeah. So how about that?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So let's go deeper.
Okay.
And now that we've kind of laid that there, that every human has a nervous system. Yes. The next layer deeper is what we talk about as being trauma sensitive. So trauma sensitive training, we have an enhanced sense of trauma awareness at this point. So yes, we know the statistics around trauma. We know how many people have experienced trauma. We know the impacts that it has on their physiology. We understand the impacts that it has on a person's behavior. We understand these 5 levels of trauma-informed training, that when we do these 5 things, we actually create more safety for all human nervous systems. So trauma sensitive, it's not likely that a bus driver would be trauma sensitive trained, or it's not likely that a janitor would be trauma sensitive trained. I'm not saying they can't be, but it's not likely that they would be, because trauma sensitive training is when you're in a position where you're working directly with someone's nervous system in order to help that person make a change in their nervous system. So we're talking about healthcare professionals, I think, should all be trauma sensitive trained. Nurses, physical therapists, occupational therapists, massage therapists, physicians, meditation instructors, Tai Chi and Qigong and yoga teachers, teachers, just all teachers, I think should be trauma sensitive trained because they're working with humans that are either going through difficult crises and times, or they're going through, or they're working with young humans, like as teachers do, that have developing nervous systems that are very susceptible to traumatic changes in their nervous system that can be prolonged for the rest of their lives. So trauma sensitive training is where we're really working deeply in a human nervous system's body mind survival mechanisms. We're doing things that focus on body awareness, focus on reducing hyperarousal, focused on engaging sensation and sensory aspects in the body. We're really working on, if you wanted to all sum that up, we're really working on self-regulation strategies, autonomic nervous system regulation strategies when we're doing trauma sensitive work.
As I'm listening to you talk about this, I'm recognizing that some people might be thinking, oh, that doesn't sound like me.
Mm.
If you're a person who is helping people create change and transformation, Brian's talking about you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because as we've talked about in a past podcast, last one or a couple of ones ago, I don't remember exactly, but we talked about how transformation always includes the nervous system. It always includes, you actually can't have transformation. You can have change without really engaging the nervous system a whole bunch, but you can't have transformation without engaging the nervous system. And as soon as you start engaging the nervous system, you start dealing with the whole history of the nervous system. And by the way, we're not even talking about trauma content. That's a deeper level.
Yeah.
We're talking about trauma sensitive. And this is one of the things that is so important in our Somatic Transformation Fundamentals program, is we're really working on this trauma sensitive level where we're not helping people become therapeutic, like therapy professionals. We're not talking and going deep into content. We're actually just working with a person's nervous system. And there's some good research to show that that is the most important part of transformation for people who have traumatized nervous systems, is learning to self-regulate their nervous system. And that's where that trauma sensitive piece really is so super important and so fundamental to actually help people get transformation, but do it in a way where they stay stabilized.
Yeah. If you're a change professional or you work in teams where there are change professionals or there's changes being made, then you want to make sure that there's a trauma sensitive person on team, so that they can do this really important work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So this is that trauma sensitive level. So depending again on who you're talking to or programs you're looking at for what level of trauma training you're really interested in, realize we're 3 levels in now. That first level is just a broad level awareness. The trauma informed level is understand how to set up a system of your policies and your procedures of how you meet every client you work with. This third level is the trauma sensitive level. This is where you're working specifically with an individual's, or I guess it could also be a group of individuals, nervous systems to help them learn self-regulation strategies for their nervous system. And there's all ways to create safety and strategies around that trauma sensitive level. Okay, let's go one deeper now. So the deepest level is trauma specific. So what trauma specific training does is it specifically engages like traumatic memories that people, so interesting thing is, trauma aware, trauma informed, trauma sensitive work can be done with any humans. And it can be certainly done with humans who've experienced trauma in the past, whether that trauma has resulted in the diagnosis of post-traumatic stress disorder or not. Because if you understand if at the trauma aware level, what you might learn is that there's way more traumatized nervous systems out there than we realize, but they're not all diagnosed as PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. So if we go all the way down to this trauma specific level, this is usually the level that is reserved for trauma coaches and trauma therapists who are trained and specifically working with the specific traumas that people have experienced in their life. So now they're working with the actual content that someone was experiencing, the trauma content. So they're working with the memories, they're working on teaching really specific processing skills that are people working with, a lot of psychodynamic modalities and those sorts of things. So you kind of can go really deep into that trauma specific kind of world. And not everybody wants to go into that trauma specific world. And by the way, not everybody as far as professionally, probably should go into that trauma specific world, because
Yep.
you have to know yourself. You have to know who you want to work with and the work that you do. We have coaches that train with us that have a lot of trauma specific training, which is interesting. They've been learned to help people to navigate through their trauma content, but they actually haven't had a lot of trauma sensitive training, which is kind of interesting, right?
Yeah.
Sort of thing. So yeah.
Yeah.
So,
and it makes them better trauma practitioners.
Exactly. So to
Actually.
understand this level is really, really important. And to understand when you're doing coaching work with people that may invariably, and so somatic coaching work will invariably go into these levels. It will invariably bring up trauma content with people just because we're working in people's bodies and trauma content comes up. So the question is, if you haven't been trained to deal with the trauma content, then what do you do? Because you've kind of opened up a little bit of a Pandora's box for people, and that's not someplace we want to leave people hanging. So we have to have a way to work with trauma-specific issues enough in order to create stability and then connect clients with professionals who have deeper trauma-specific knowledge. So we do a little bit of trauma-specific training in our Somatic Coach Pro training, just with the idea of creating stability when content issues comes up. We want to be able to create stability for people and then be able to help people resource deeper trauma professionals if that's what the person needs, sort of thing. So it's kind of this two-phase approach. We don't want to shy away from it because that can create not distrust with the client, but kind of uncertainty with the client, right? We want to make sure the client is feeling certain about our capacity to really help them through the whole thing. So we have to have enough of an understanding about trauma-specific work without claiming that you're a trauma coach.
That's a really interesting point, Brian. I don't think I've ever really thought about, but it's true. We're not, if you want to be a trauma coach, like that's not what we're going for, but we do trauma specific work, but it's just enough so that you understand how to completely support so that if something comes up, you can totally handle it.
Right, exactly.
And our clients, our students' clients feel that. They feel that confidence. They feel that certainty. Yeah. Like, I got you. I totally got you. But it's because we do a little bit of that so that people can get it and have that capability. Mm-hmm. And that's not where our students and graduates are going most of the time, unless they come into the curriculum already having trauma training, already being trauma coaches or trauma therapists.
Right. Or they go further and get more trauma specific skills afterwards.
Exactly. But it is that knowing that allows the students in their trauma sensitive work to be just so capable.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's really important. So understanding those four levels. So when you're out there kind of looking and reading articles or looking what organizations do, and remember, we have a really strong feeling that any somatic coach training program actually has a responsibility to be teaching at least to the depth of trauma sensitive work. Mm-hmm. Right? Which means those three layers, which means the broad awareness, the structural awareness, and then the working in the nervous system directly around self-regulation strategies. Like every somatic coach training program has a responsibility to be working at least at those three levels.
This is a really good conversation for people to be having with themselves and others when they're considering what programs to be taking. Mm-hmm. For sure. Not all somatic training programs, not all somatic coach programs are going to mention anything about the trauma stuff. So you actually want to ask questions if you don't see it laid out for you. And by the way, I'm really glad we're doing this episode because, again, the language might be different. So you want to make sure you understand what's happening. But also, Brian, I'm thinking about graduates as they're talking about either getting jobs or being in teams and working with people, to be having these conversations, because there's so much value that the graduates can offer to teams and communities and organizations, things like that, to help to set these things up and have a common language, if nothing else, about it. Because these are really, really important concepts, and they're going to continue to become really important concepts, I believe, over the course of our next whatever amount of years of history until it becomes the normal way that we operate.
Yep.
So there's so much value that somatic coaches can offer in the world when you really understand this delineation. No matter how other people talk about it, you can create common language about it and then be on the same page and put some really solid systems in place.
Yeah, I love that. So focus on the way that each of the levels was described, not necessarily the title of because again, those titles may change a little bit.
Unless you're in our universe.
Yeah,
we'll
you're in our universe, that's what we use.
Yeah.
But if you're
out there,
you ask questions about when you're looking around for training, like how much of your training is involved around trauma and what level do you do that training at? And now you kind of have a way to think about, as they describe to you, what level they do the training at, kind of put them in buckets. So here at the Somatic Coaching Academy, we train into all those levels. And love to have any conversation or questions that you have about that. Just reach out, let us know. We'd love to have those conversations.
I think this is a really great podcast to share with communities and organizations that you're a part of so that you can all be on the same page about it. And you don't necessarily have to be the teacher. Brian laid it out for you. So think about an organization or community that you're involved in that you can share this podcast with so that you can all have the common language about it and all do this amazing, great work in the world.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Brian. It was a really powerful conversation.
Yeah. Thanks for being here. Really appreciate it. Thanks for being a part of the podcast, and we'll see you soon.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to this episode. We hope that this conversation will help you improve your practice and change the way you think about your work, your clients, and yourself. Continue your exploration of trauma-sensitive somatic coaching by listening to more podcast episodes at somaticcoachingacademy.com. You could be the trusted guide that people turn to help them with their most challenging situations and to reach their most precious goals. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time.